All right, welcome back, Rage Nation. We are at it again. I'm gonna go ahead and do another kind of reaction to a game that I played. This one's gonna be uh, the new Big Hat. This is gonna be Som'er 2, so the title Lootmonger, and it was actually against the Ballyhoo Bucket. So this is a Bayou mirror match. So it was a fun game, and I'm gonna kind of go through once again. This is just my initial thoughts on Big Hat because they did get a rework. And then also just talking about some of the things that were good about the angler keyword and some of the matchups and interactions that I thought were really interesting. And once again, how I thought the list was. And we'll kind of just go from there. Trying a new camera out also, seeing if that works or if I just need to use the better computer for streaming. So we will see. And if you're in the chat, definitely good to hear you and feel free to chime in. Anything that you want to ask, I can answer while I'm streaming this. And if you want to support us directly, make sure that you guys do that by going to patreon.com/reachquitwire. You can support us for as little as $1 and appreciate any kind of support. So getting into the matchup. So this wasn't the final score because, when you're playing in person, a lot of times you keep score on the table. This pretty much was the max amount of points that I had. Just because, once again, I'm figuring out the keywords, so I'm not necessarily honed into scoring points as efficiently as I am with other keywords. So you can see, though, it was standard deployment with guard the stash, leave your mark, vendetta, set the trap, catch and release, and in your face. So a little bit of kill, a little bit of scheming. I decided to do both schemes. I did scheming schemes, I should say. I did set the trap with leave your mark. I feel like these two are pretty decent for Som'er to accomplish. Also good for him to deny. And I kind of figured that my opponent might go a little more killy. So I was kind of also prepared for that. So the Clampets, what they ended up bringing was the Ballyhoo Bucket with Bruce. I don't think he had any upgrades. He did not. Okay. There we go. So he had Bruce with Anti-Mill, Uncle Bog, Judd and Honey, Hermits, Ruffles, and another Hermit. So just a decent list, lots of armor. And then I ended up bringing Lootmonger with 2 Skeeters, Rabbit, White Rabbit Company, a Bayou Gremlin, Old Cranky, Georgian Olaf with 12 cups, Lenny with 12 cups, and I brought Big Brain Bryn out of keyword. So this definitely was an interesting matchup. I was worried about the Clampets just coming in and just beating the crap out of me, specifically with the Bucket, Anti-Mel, Bog. I felt like those 3 could come in and try to bash a little bit. I was also, of course, worried about Oh No Ogo Pogo. So the bonus for the Clampets basically kidnaps a model, puts some damage on it. Luckily, since I had Old Cranky, I was able to deny him kidnapping models. He did try to do that, and then I'll pull... I got to pull it up on here because the cards aren't in here yet. So Old Cranky specifically. There we go. Okay, pull that up there. There he is. Let's see if I can just click on it. There we go. So specifically, you can handle it, Sonny. This aura is just, it's amazing. It's probably too good, but I don't see a world where you play Som'er, either version, and don't bring Old Cranky, because the fact that a model within 8, and that probably should be an aura instead of just within 8, because you can hide Cranky essentially. It's really good because a Big Hat model can discard a card essentially for take the hit, but it can be a model within 4 inches. So that can be a minion of 3 costs or less, which if you're paying attention is going to be your Skeeters and your Bayou Gremlins. So that being said, let's see if I can pull up the Bayou Gremlins real quick. Not the Gremlins, the Skeeters. So Skeeters are defense 7, move 6. Their willpower sucks, but most time you're going to get attacked by defense. And so all of a sudden you pitch a card and they have to beat a defense 7 model. So what ended up happening with the Oh No Ogo Pogo is that it targets defense, it's stat 7, and he just killed a Skeeter. And I was like, that's fine. And it's a bonus, so he couldn't do it again. He did try to do Drawn to the Seas, but then I would discard to have a Bayou Gremlin make it happen instead, make it move. So it it was tough for him to try and set up that initial engagement that the Ballyhoo Bucket likes to do. Traditionally, if you're playing the Bucket, you like to kidnap a model and then just let your crew beat down on it, whether that's through your caught in the motor attack, anti-Mel's gun, or anything else. Let me check this Discord real quick just to make sure. Of course, it's going to take forever because I'm streaming. Probably somebody just mentioning something, so I'll go back to the stream and I'll make sure that's nothing crazy. Yeah, the Cranky's just really good. And it's five stones, divert attacks to things that you don't care if they die. And yeah, he's just good. We'll talk about maybe give me a hand kid here in a second. So as the game kind of progressed, it was a little cagey at first. And something that I did notice specifically is as it progressed, one, Judd and Honey was pretty good for clearing out gremlins. The 1/2/2 was just really solid. So I had to be a little more cautious of my gremlin summons. And he didn't need line of sight. So it was good. That was a good counter pick, even though I don't think he was planning it. But it definitely was good. Anytime that you can just blast off of stuff and clear out a gremlin or two, definitely is good. Also gave him some healing. That was really good as well. So as it kind of progressed, you notice that there was a lot of armor in this. You have the Hermits and then you have the Clampets. So I didn't have armor piercing in my list. Like if you just look at it, there's not any armor piercing. But something that they do have is they do have the Banjanistas that Som'er, we'll go to Banjanista real quick. So the Banjanistas, they can do the right tune to ignore armor. So Som'er 2 can replace a Bayou Gremlin and make it a Banjanista with his bonus action. But the problem is I don't actually have a Banjanista model yet. So I wasn't going to proxy it just because it's in the shop. I'm not trying to proxy stuff. So I ended up basically not summoning a Banjanista. But if I did, that makes it where you can ignore the armor. So that would have made it a lot easier to deal with the, going back to the Clampets. That would have made it a lot easier to do some damage to the Bucket. It would have done better to kill the Hermits quicker because Jordy and Olaf were putting out some like good damage, and they did kill. Eventually, my crew did kill both Hermits by end of turn 2. But actually, I think 3. But the problem is it just took too many actions because the Hermits, they take the hit, so you have to focus on these first, unless they're out of position. And in this game, they really weren't. So they have extended reach, so you got to get around that. And then they're also giving out shielded, and then also they have take the hit and their armor too. So plus they remove markers. So I didn't want them removing scheme markers because I chose 2 schemes that I needed to have markers down with set to trap and leave your mark. So these needed to die. This was kind of my priority 1, which sucks because ideally you want to be putting pressure on Anti-Mel and the Clampets. So I was having to waste it on these 2 Hermits. And I know my opponent in the store was like, well, maybe I didn't need 2, but it actually worked out pretty good. If I had the Banjanistas, they would have gone down a lot quicker. But that box is in order, and I'll have it soon to play with Som'er 2, because that makes this all of a sudden a lot more scary. Specifically when you have, we'll go ahead and go to Georgie and Olaf here, that they have a 2/4/5 gun with crit strike. So and Ricochet. Ricochet actually came up a little bit too. I think I spiked 2 or 4 damage into Anti-Mel. But this was it's good because then that's just 2/4/5. You don't get the crit strike when you use that action from the Banjanistas, but it's just 2/4/5 ignore armor. And I mean, if you look at the Hermits, they don't have a ton of hit points. So, I mean, you can almost one-shot, if you get the right Joker, you could, but you can almost one-shot these with Georgie and Olaf if they're ignoring armor. And in the list that I was running, go back to my list, you can see Georgie and Olaf can get not just 2 shots, right? So they have 2 shots, but then you can also get an extra shot with the Lootmonger. And I'll pull this up because it's pretty similar. But Gremlin Raid, you get to take a gun action if you're Big Hat. So that's a 3rd attack that you can do with Georgie and Olaf. And then you can also use the bonus on the new version of Som'er to get a Crier. And the Crier can obey Georgie and Olaf to get another attack. So you can get 4 attacks with Georgie and Olaf, and ignoring armor is pretty good in this setup against the Ballyhoo Bucket in this armored crew. So that kind of put me behind the ball here as well. Ruffles did come in and scatter me off a point with his crazed chicken. I was able to get back into position to score my point for the strategy for guard the stash, but it made me kind of react more to it. And then Ruffles ended up dying because, Ruffles dies. It's just kind of what happens. But he did his job for one turn. So that's the problem with Ruffles is he goes in, he craze chickens you, and then he usually dies. So he's a very finesse piece that is hard to make work. Trying to get some other ideas of things. Jed and Honey was good. Auntie Mel did some work. She was putting some good pressure on models. She eventually did end up killing Georgie and Olaf. She had just had some really good shots. And I think Red Jokered maybe Georgie and Olaf too. So I didn't bring... Let me go into this real quick. That's fine. Big Brain Bryn was kind of meh for me. I brought him out a keyword. Obviously the card's nice. My problem was, though, Sober Up was fine. Calculate's good. Pulling the strings didn't come up as much as I thought it would. It just wasn't... It's funny because you think with the new Som'er too, specifically. So there's a lot of abilities to put scheme markers down, right? And let's go back up to this. There we go. And you would think that not ransack, but spot the goods. You think like, oh, there's going to be scheme markers everywhere. This crew does a really good job of just using the scheme markers, not just for scoring, which I did, but then you also use it to get gremlins, and then you use it to get focus if you have 12 cups, and then you use it for a lot of different things. And it leaves it to the point where there's not always that many scheme markers down on the ground, I found. Like, I've played 2 games with him now. I've played a game with the other one, and it honestly turns out most of the time where it's like maybe you have 2 or 3 scheme markers on, maybe a model with a hat that counts as a scheme marker. So that's been one of the things that I know I'm only 2 games in with him, but that's one of the things I'm like, okay, I need to get more of these down. So I think I need to be more aggressive with this version of Lootmonger, like getting in my opponent's face. So that's something that, I don't know, Bryn just had a hard time finding a scheme marker to do pulling the strings. And you don't want to kill your minions. Unless it's a Bayou Gremlin, then I guess that's fine. But he's solid. People like him a lot. I'm like, he's fine, but I think I can find other models that I like better with the new Big Hat. But I wouldn't have a problem bringing him. I almost would rather have Uncle Bog instead of Big Brain. So, because Bog puts down a scheme marker for your crew to use, and he helps you filter your hand, and he's decent at sitting on a point. So I actually like Uncle Bog a lot in this situation. He helps the crew do what it wants to do. So that was fine. The new Lenny Jones is great. I feel like you have to keep Cranky within 8 of Lenny to make him a problem. If Lenny gets off by himself, he can become a victim. Obviously I gotta go back here. So let's scroll back down. Actually, before I scroll back down, because I'm not going to come back up to this card, I will say Sack of Loot. I'm starting to become a fan of this, especially like the throw junk's fine. Gremlin Raid is good. Obviously the bonus is great, but I think because of Spot the Goods, you want him as close to your opponent as possible. That way that 10-inch aura really comes into effect, which the Ballyhoo Bucket, by the way, ignores, which was really great. Let me tell you. I don't think my opponent knew it, but I'll pull this up just so people can see it. I think it's, what is it? Eye of a Hurricane. Models within 3 of him ignore the pulse effects or aura effects of the enemy. So if there were things close enough to the bucket, I just didn't get, and that might have been part of the problem in this game too. So maybe I need to be more kind to this and realizing there would be more scheme markers if the bucket didn't have that aura. But I want to be up in the mix to get as much benefits and dropping schemes from that as possible. And also, Sack of Loot's really good. Being a 3-4-5 with a scheme marker around, dropping more schemes, shove aside to get more attacks, stunning strike to get stunned. Putting out stun's huge. I did that to a couple models, and it punishes them for, being there. And then if I can put out slow, that's great with a throw junk. So I think focusing a little bit on this, I feel like maybe Gremlin raid once into Georgie and Olaf, and then you want to do a melee or throw junk to get the slow out. I wouldn't throw junk unless I know it's a kill or I'm going to get the slow. Otherwise, I would much rather be getting the Sack of Loot for sure. So that's my thoughts on Lootmonger. I think that's kind of the way I'm going to play him moving forward. He has good stats. He's willpower and defense 6, hard to wound. Really good. Really, really good. But going back to Olaf, Lenny. So he's been pretty solid. I haven't gotten hardly any use out of Gremlin General. I think it's come up once. His attacks are amazing. It's 3-4-5. Sweeping strike's been good. Even shove aside. I think I shoved Ruffles off the point and then attacked, I think, Bog. Because I wanted to get back into within 2 inches of the markers. Toss has been huge. I've really liked Toss since I started playing Bonasuva in Arcanus. So a size 4 Toss to get models out of the way has been really good. Random Bout of Brilliance, I actually found out today when playing Dixon. You can actually cheat this now. Like before you couldn't cheat this, but now you can. So if you need a card, that's been good. I've been able to cheat like a 4 of Tomes to draw a card. There's been times, I think in this game, I actually did 1 damage to Ruffles to kill him with the bonus. So that was really good. Let's see here. Jason said, I played 1 game with new big hats, completely forgot Flurry on Lenny. Yeah, I mean, once you realize Flurry's on Lenny's card, getting 3, and I did get 1 chance where I did get 4 attacks because I got the shove aside and then I flurried. So it was a lot of swings going down. But yeah, definitely. And I'm glad, Jason, you also feel the same about Big Brain Bryn. He's fine. Like, Big Brain is never going to be bad. You can play him almost anywhere and he's fine. Gives you a card, filters your deck, draws a card, and then you can go ahead and sober up something. So he's really good. But yeah, I think Uncle Bog works really well with the new big hat. But yeah, I even think that Lenny's stat 7 gun is pretty solid. I've got the knock aside on that to get models off points. That happened once in this game. That was really good. So really enjoyed the new Lenny on that. Let's see here. So any other thoughts on my models before? I think the White Rabbit Company I actually like with the title. I don't think you need the White Rabbit Company with the first version. But the title version, Lootmonger, I think you do want the White Rabbit Company because when you put a hat onto Som'er, it just makes him 3-4-5 damage, which is just good. So I think you do that turn 1, just set it up. Beckoning Call has been good to get my models into position. So just a solid model to help get things pushed around. And Needle and Thread isn't terrible. It's a pretty solid action. 1, 2, 4, but it has an execute and pulled here and there. So just some more shenanigans. So yeah, I think as this game progressed, I didn't unpack cleanly because this was my first time with the title, this game I'm talking about specifically. And it took me a little bit to get things out of the way of each other. So I had to spend some actions of that. I wasn't sure which ski markers I wanted to pull up with 12 cups, remove with other abilities. Skeeters were holding down the defense. And once it started getting into it, it was starting to go pretty good. The game was kind of up in the air. I ended up killing, like I said, the 2 hermits I killed. I killed Ruffles. So it was just Judd and Honey, Uncle Bog, Anti-Mel, Bruce, and the Clampets. And by the end of turn 4, which is kind of where we called it, he ended up getting to a point where I needed to summon a Skeeter or a Bayou Gremlin to help defend my models. But the problem is Judd and Honey was able to annoy and kind of clear out just enough of my stuff. Plus, I think also the bucket got a good, shockwave in there that cleared it out too. So that made it where Som'er and Lenny were kind of like a little bit out there, and I ran out of stones. Well, that caused basically Bog, I think it was Bog, yeah. Bog had 2 swings onto my master. I reduced damage on one of them to take none, but the other one he red jokered to kill the Lootmonger. So Som'er ended up dying because he was kind of just sitting there, in the mix with Bog and in the mix with some other models. And he just got red jokered, which you can't do much against that. Taking 6 damage, just no way to reduce it. You just can't do anything against that. So Lenny was kind of by himself, but the bucket hadn't activated yet. And without stones, without any minions to take the hit, I think at that point, the bucket probably kills Lenny, which is pretty rough. So at the end of turn 4, I think all I would have had left is the White Rabbit, Cranky, and Big Brain Bryn. So I didn't really have anything at the end of the game to fight back with at that point. Let's see here. Yeah. So the pass tokens thing is definitely interesting, Dixon. It almost like sometimes panics your opponent to use the pass token before they lose it. So that's been something that's been interesting to see as I play people with Big Hat. Is I know I summoned a couple models and then my opponent used them immediately because he was worried about me killing my own models and then losing those pass tokens, just period. So yeah, definitely interesting. So yeah, I ended up kind of getting whittled down here, and that's just because I think the Clamps are good. If I had a Banjanista, I think it would have gone more in my favor, just because I could get rid of those hermits earlier, and then I can start putting pressure on the more important stuff with Uncle Bog, Anti-Mel, and the Ballyhoo Bucket. So I ended up, I think, capping out at 4 is probably realistic. I might have scored the second point of Set the Trap, and since Som'er was dead, there was no way I was going to get the second Leave Your Mark point. But yeah, I think that would have been 2, 3, 4, 5. My opponent had at least 5 because he took In Your Face. He scored that when he killed Georgie and Olaf with the bucket being nearby. And then I think his other one, I don't think he declared his other one. So that would have been 3 for the strat, 1 for that. Second point of In Your Face for 5. And then he probably gets 6 for whatever his second scheme was. Because like I said, I just didn't have enough to fight back at the beginning of turn 5. So that's kind of how that one pans out. But I will say, summing this up, going back to the Lootmonger's card. Boop, boop. So I will say, I think there's a couple ways you can run the Lootmonger. I think people, because of Gremlin Raid, tend to think, oh, maybe I bring a bunch of good guns and I just kind of, manage and shoot. I actually like the idea of focusing on Sack of Loot with Lenny to set up like a strong front, and then bring a gun like Jebediah or Georgie and Olaf or both, and use those to kind of get 2 extra good shots a turn. But then also you have this front line of Som'er and Lenny to just punish your opponent with a melee. Because, like I said, these triggers are really good, and he can hang around, especially if you have old Cranky to back him up with a minion. It's really hard to kill Som'er Teeth Jones Lootmonger. I think in this game, I was playing a little loose with his health, and then I got red jokered. So I mean, he's not impossible to kill, but I think he's pretty, even though he's got this little dad bod belly up here, I think he can hang out in the mix, especially if he starts slowing and stunning models, then those activations don't become as good, and it makes him even better. And then you have Lenny in there to help clean up, and you're just putting, because then they're going to cheat to try and kill you, and then you're putting scheme markers down. Then you can turn those into gremlins, and you have 12 cups on Lenny, so they're not getting their bonus. Just, I think there's a lot there. I'm just at the point now where I'm learning the crew, and now I'm starting to learn how to win with them, meaning like how to score your points. Because the thing with this keyword, this is not going to be an easy keyword to win with if you're new to playing it. And I think that's the case because there's a lot of interactions and a lot of different ways you can go with the crew. Like I said, you could shoot, you could move, you can drop schemes, you can pick up schemes. I was having fun with my opponent last night, and he was like, "Yeah, it just seemed like you were doing a lot, and it was good, but it seemed like you almost got into like Dirtle mode, like you needed to go do things to score." And I was like, "You're right," because I was kind of drawing cards, I was killing gremlins, I was turning them into things, I was doing all this cool stuff, but it did feel like dirtling, if you know the term from Magic, where it's kind of like you're messing with your own stuff, and you're doing 1,000 things, but then you go and you end your turn and nothing actually changed on the board. And that's kind of what I was doing. So I think setting up kind of that front line, having a decent gun to back it up, and then all the support pieces is kind of how you want to play this. It's still a bubble crew. It just doesn't suck, right? It's a playable bubble crew. As I was talking with Dixon, there are some hard counters to this. I think shockwaves can be brutal. I think blast can be brutal. And then I think if you can kidnap a model without it taking the hit from like a mosquito or something, that's a good way to do it. Conditions, so this crew can be punished by conditions. So this isn't like an auto win crew. It's not the new hotness that is going to, just overpower every other keyword and you'll never see another master in Bayou. This is a solid pick. I could play this and do a lot of pools and I think do very well. But I could see myself still playing Maw Tucket, and still playing Zip, and still playing Zoraida, and still playing the Anglers, and doing very well with all those keywords. So this has a very good feel to it, though. Like, it can fight and it can scheme, so it has a lot of playability. As Dixon said, Charm Warders, so if you go against 10 Thunders, that definitely sucks. Because Charm Warders, not only do they stop demises, but they also punish summons, and they do like 2 damage to summons, I believe, which means your Bayou Gremlins just die if they're in that area. So yeah, that can be tough. There's going to be counters to this crew, and you can still play, like, even though if you bring a Charm Warder, that's just something you have to deal with. Like if I saw a Charm Warder kind of come into where I wanted summon or wanted to do stuff, I would basically have to be like, okay, I need to either kill that model or I need to relocate it. So in that case, I would either go, okay, I'm going to kill it with Som'er, or I'm going to shove aside to get it out of the way, or I'm going to toss it with Lenny. So it just makes you react to it because, like any other good Malifaux keyword, there are counters. Some of them are bad, and you need to work around them. You can't just play the same way and expect to win in Malifaux. So I really enjoyed it. I think this keyword and this title version specifically, I like the title better than the other version. However, I was surprised how good the other version is as well. So I am tempted to keep playing that. And I don't know how to win yet with this crew. So when I figure that out, I'll be able to tell you more where I think they fit pool-wise. Plus, I think tomorrow, Weird's going to tell us more about GG4. So we'll get a new gaining grounds. And that'll honestly clear up where I think these two versions of Som'er fit. So I'm not going to guesstimate and say, oh, I think he's good in the guard the stash with this scheme and this scheme, because it's going to change here soon. So I'll definitely give my input as we see the new gaining grounds come up, because obviously we'll have an episode on that, and I'll give more input on that. So yeah, hope you enjoyed kind of my thoughts on Big Hat, both versions of it. Just some quick kind of counter thoughts to it, how the game played out, and me slowly learning how to win with this crew and what's good and what I'm having troubles with. So I think until next time, though, I'm going to leave it there, trying to keep these shorter so people can enjoy them without watching it for an hour. But yeah, putting out more YouTube. Hopefully y'all are enjoying it. And until next time, make sure that you guys are flipping cards, flipping tails. We will see you all later.